Throughout history, we have heard of children working in order to provide income for families. Child labor is nothing new given that it still remains present till this day. But during the Industrial Revolution, child labor reached new extremes. Children often work long hours in dangerous factory conditions for very little money. Their small size allowed them to move in tiny spaces. Due to their age, children could be paid less than adults, making them more manageable. They were forced to give up their education. 19th century reformers and labor organizers sought to restrict child labor and improve working conditions. One of these progressive reformers was Louis Hine. Using his skills, he utilized his camera as both a research tool and major instrument of social reform. Hine was born in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. He studied sociology at the University of Chicago. With his knowledge, he then went on to become a professor at the Ethical Culture School in New York. His work as a photographer first took off in 1904 when he took some of his students on a field trip to photograph immigrants arriving at Ellis Island in the New York harbor. This photo project helped with highlighting the power and value of his photography. He eventually established his own studio in upstate New York. His purpose as a photographer was to use photographs as a documentary tool in order to show the things that needed to be corrected. In August of 1908, he landed a steady job as a photographer for the National Child Labor Committee. For the next years to come, Hine would be a part of a huge lobbying effort to end the practice of child labor. Leaving his family behind, Hine traveled south to document child workers. This would not be an easy task for Hine, as child labor investigators had been harassed, jailed, and even ran out of town. Hine would pose as a fire inspector or as a representative of manufacturer equipment in order to enter factories with his camera. Using the buttons on his coat, he would measure height. Carrying a notepad and pencil, he would record names, address, ages, and quotes from his subjects. He kept detailed notes on every single one of his pictures, which to this day still exist. Hine stated to the NCLC, "The photographs I obtained will tell their own story," and so they did. Hine's photographs and endeavors brought to light the horrible working conditions not suitable for children. The equipment was dangerous, sanitation was poor, working conditions were unhealthy, and the hours were long. Many of these children were illiterate. These children were caught up in the transformation of America, where tiny human beings were being degraded into machines. Hine believed that a child who could work for 10 to 20 cents per day was being exploited. As a photographer, Hine had a powerful ability to convey emotion through his photographs, being able to connect with his subjects on a personal level. When asked about the beauty and effect of his photographs, Hine simply replied with, "I only photograph beautiful children." Though he was joking, the honest truth was that he really did believe that every single one of these kids was beautiful. He wanted to capture the essence of their being, since the work that they did was destroying and demeaning them. Hine truly cared for the well-being of these kids, and he wanted others to do so as well. The goal was to create intimate, personal human portraits. Hine's subjects would look directly into or just to the side of the camera, allowing for a personal interpretation and leaving an impression on the viewer. Child labor had actually become his obsession. He developed his negatives in the cellar and cold bins of the houses he stayed in. His work on this project served as the driving force behind public opinion and was an essential part in reforming child labor laws. Hine was the publicity director of the NCLC, utilizing his photographs as propaganda. A bill regulating child labor was signed by President Woodrow Wilson in 1916. When the U.S. entered World War I, progressive reforms were put aside and this new law was declared unconstitutional and repealed. It took various years before the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act was put in place. For the first time, minimum ages of employment and hours of work for children were regulated by the federal law, the age of employment being 16, which to this day still stands. Louis Hine died 2 years after the child law was enacted. He is remembered as a pioneer and monumental photographer who worked effortlessly to achieve his goal of giving these children the life they deserve.